Hey, welcome back. So today, here in the shop, we're back on this fabrication project that we like to call Stitches, our 1970 Dodge Challenger. The stuff that we do here is stuff that you can take and directly apply to the projects that you're working on. We show you that it doesn't have to be overwhelming if you just take your fabrication projects one bite at a time. Well, let's just not talk about it and let's just do it. I'm Mike and this is Mike R's Shop.
Working out of a 100-year-old refurbished barn, bringing 35 years of experience to projects considered beyond repair. Vision, creativity, and problem solving are essential tools in this place. Watch as we transform junk into polished metal miracles. This is My Car's Shop.
I have to admit that the feedback you guys have been giving me lately has been tremendously encouraging. It's easy to get discouraged, not about the projects, but about growing a YouTube channel. But we've seen slow, steady growth, and the feedback that I'm getting from you guys shows me that I think we're on the right track here with this channel. So many other channels skip over all the details and just show you beginning and end, and not really all of the blood, sweat, and tears that goes in between. These projects are huge. They're huge, and I'm not saying that to discourage you. I'm saying that's the reality of them. So you need to decide how you want to do your project, but don't allow yourself to be discouraged. Remember that every little bite that you take out of your project is a bite you never have to chew again. Little by little, bit by bit, bite by bite, before long, you'll be done with your project. We've really only been serious about this project for a year, and we certainly haven't worked on it exclusively. We have 9 other cars here in the shop that you can find on the channel. But again, it's wintertime, and that's when we really hit hard on fabrication because, quite frankly, it may be overly optimistic, but I would love to throw a motor in this car next spring and be putting it around the property here, even if it wasn't on the yard. So that's my goal. All right, let's just stop the talk and get into it. I've got a little sidetrack project from what we've been doing over here. Something I want to do in here, and I'll get you over here and show you what and why. Apparently, I've lost my handy-dandy little pointer that I use, so we'll use this other handy-dandy little pointer. But I wanted to point out an area that I like to strengthen on some of these cars. I don't always do it. But if you watch in here, this can get kind of weak in here, and right now I know this car is missing a lot of its structural integrity, but one of the places that it's flexing, you can see the frame rail here, is kind of moving up and down. Part of that is because this is not joined to here yet, and we have to do that. Part of that is because of this rusty material in here is just getting weak. So one of the things I've had in mind, we're not fabricating the floor pan quite yet. The floor pan here is solid, so I'm not going to be replacing necessarily that piece. But I like to put a reinforcement strap in here to kind of go along with the one that's underneath where these two come together. And that adds a lot of strength if you make something like that out of 18 gauge material. So we're going to go ahead and get that done today because it will add a tremendous amount of strength to the back of this car. Just to note, I have kept very close attention to the dimension of this corner of the car to the floor. I know what it's supposed to be, just to be sure that as I cut everything apart, it hasn't sagged. It has not at all, but I am aware of that I've taken so much material out of this that this is a little bit weak back here, and I want to be very careful that this car doesn't lose squareness. Remember, I've not squared it to the floor necessarily, I'm just keeping it square to itself. One of the things that I wanted to mention, because I know we have people of various experiences, and I try to cover everything from the very introductory basics all the way up to as advanced as I can get. A person at a middle school level of fabrication. Keep your metal clean when you're going to be working with it. You'll go through a million of these markers if you're using markers. If you don't, this metal comes with kind of a coating on it anyway, but especially after it sits around the shop, it collects rust and dust, and you'll trash your permanent markers quickly. So I always either run over it with a grinder or with a DA, where I'm going to be marking stuff out and wipe it with some prep sol. That will really prolong your marker life. we got our piece cut. We're just going to go from the front of that floor edge seam because we've got work to do on the floor up there. So where this comes in, and this is going to work pretty well here, I think. We're fortunate that we don't have to do a ton of bending on this, but that's really going to add some nice strength in there. So it's got to this way a little bit, and then maybe do a little bit of a trim back here. But I got to remember that I also have to make a floor, so you know, I just got to think about that. The floor is good and solid here. There's no point in cutting that out. I will just accommodate that in the new floor when I make these pieces. I'm probably going to make this floor in 2 pieces because I'm lazy, and I'm not necessarily looking to you know, replicate factory original anyway. But I really want to get this brace done in here to help strengthen things up as I'm moving forward on this. So I think that's going to work pretty well. We just need to establish a datum point somewhere, and then start getting it to bend and fit in. I don't think there's much to do up there. It's just right back here. It's got to around that way a little bit. One of the big challenges is going to be getting things lined up. So what I've done is I've gone and lined that front edge up perfectly, and I'm just going to actually put a drill hole down through here somewhere that I can stick a cleco in, so that as I'm fitting this, I can just pop that in and out of there to make sure everything is lining up. So we'll put that somewhere easy. I don't know, easy peasy squeezy about there. Very good. So now I'll know exactly that I'm in the same spot every single time, as I'll pop that cleco back in there as I'm forming this. So again, datum points are very important, because if you don't have a datum point, you're going to be going back and forth and not have things exactly lining up. So you can use sheet metal screws or whatever too, but again, I like the clecos because when you use screws, it wears the holes out and it gets harder and harder to get things to fit accurately. Go. Now I've got my datum established, and I can start taking my marker and marking where I need to start stretching this to get this to come around the way I want it to. It's looking good. I'm happy with that. Using wider lines to tell me where to stretch a little, and then using shorter lines to tell me where to stretch more. It'll also this way, but right now we're not worried about that. I know you've seen tons of this on the channel, but this is the work. This is what has to happen. So always understretch or shrink. Do it less than you think you need so you can sneak into it. I do it all the time, and I still overstretch or shrink things, and then I have to go back and shrink to make up for how much I stretched it, or stretch to make up for how much I shrunk. So as much as I've been doing this, I still overdo it, and I'm always telling myself less is more, less is more, less is more. The other thing that can make your life a little bit easier is just to give yourself a line somewhere between the 2 pieces of metal that can be a clue where that hole is. But it's starting to come around nicely. We need to stretch a little bit more in this wide area before we start worrying about this. So I'll give this a couple more tugs here, and we'll go from there. It's literally lather, rinse, and repeat. That's quite a bit right there. That may have been too much. I don't know. We'll go a little bit more there. Actually looking pretty good all the way up to here now, so we just need to kind of a little bit more on this end here, make some marks about where it needs to start. Not too shabby, not too shabby at all. marks, I know my hole is close. Boom, back in. Fitting good up there. Could use a little bit more in here, but again, it's getting close. And I may not continue this around for right now. I may cut this off right in here and then do this part of it later, or I may not even add this piece in here. I don't know yet. I'm figuring it out as I go. This needs to tip that way a little bit, but we will do that when we're welding it in. So it's looking good. Light over here. You know what? I think we're about right. Good thing I brought the light over here. If I go any more, if I'm going to continue this, it needs to bend right here at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and do that just to see what it looks like. But we're good all the way up to here now. Okay, she's starting to look pretty good now. I'll take you over there with a handheld and let you see what we've got. And again, let me reiterate, I know this isn't factory. The point of this is reinforcement. This is stitches. This is all going to be covered up with seam sealer and carpeting or whatever I decide to put in the trunk of this car. So I don't care if it looks original. This is all about function over form for sure. It's not going to look bad anyway, but I just want to make that clear that this is about adding extra strength back here in an area on the car that is weak. And why would we not want to add strength? You can do this to any Mopar. This one in particular, because things were so rusted and so forth, as you've seen through the 50-some episodes on this car, I was thinking about ways to reinforce this, and this was a way that I realized that we could add a lot of strength with just a very little bit of material. So I've got a few challenges here on a Challenger, imagine that. I can tip this back pretty easily by attaching it to the floor and just hammering and dollying this in place as I'm welding. That's not a problem. But what I'm seeing is this piece here is going to be really it's going to be a problem. So I need to decide how I'm going to handle this and where I'm going to trim this. And I think I had made this piece an inch long anyway. I think we're going to come back in right here and cut this just like this. And yeah, that gets us just beyond the edge of, probably about right here, just beyond the edge of where that patch I needed to make in there anyway was. So let's nip this off, and then we'll start getting this cleaned up and getting it ready to this in there. Okay, so that's pretty good now. We've got that kind of fit down in there, and it just covers over where I didn't get this piece extended around, and I think that's going to be a decent place to join things. I may notch this a little bit once I go to do the floor. I don't know. I'm not going to worry about that right now. There's just a lot to do here, and I'm going to do what makes sense at the time. So I'm not thinking that far ahead. I'm just looking at what makes sense in the moment here with a mind to the future, but not obsessing about the next step. I'm worried about chewing this bite right now, and that's what matters most. Right, so we've got that cleaned up pretty well now. Good enough to be, well, very good. We're just going to put some rust conditioner on it and then start preparing our new piece to go in there. So we're just force drying this rust conditioner with a hairdryer, and then we'll get some paint over it. And here's a pro tip. Borrow your wife's hairdryer 25 years ago and just forget to give it back. You'll thank me for that tip. I'm sure she will too. So one of the next things we need to do is drill spot weld holes about every 4 inches in this, and of course in that face also, because we're going to solid weld it on the edges, but we're also going to go ahead and do plug welds in it so that we get really good connection and penetration. Okie dokie, so kind of silly of me, I drilled that spot weld hole right up there, right into the spot where it's missing a piece of metal, but I have a solution for that you'll like, so that's good that I made that mistake. I was just randomly drilling the holes without thinking about what they might be going into. But it's looking good, so a couple of things we'll talk about here real quickly. Duddy had asked about the back of the metal, what I do with that. And I've touched on this in other episodes, but it's a good question that I want to go back because there's hundreds more people here now than there was when I was making the frame rails for this car and explaining some of this. I do not use weld-through primer because primer tends to be a moisture sponge. It absorbs moisture. Now, when you have two pieces of metal put together, I've done this before, two bare pieces of metal welded together, it's very, very unlikely that it's going to rust there unless moisture gets in there. So my philosophy is don't use primer because primer will wick moisture in there. I'd almost rather leave nothing in there. None of these cars are ever going to see hardly even any rain, much less salt and snow, but I still, I will prime them, or like I rust treated these parts. And I think I also, yes I did, I shooted them real quickly. I shooted them. Shot them real quickly with some self-etching primer and then went over it with just some regular Rust-Oleum. What I normally do is high heat paint so that it prevents the paint from burning away from the weld spots too much. I don't have any right now, and when I actually went to our local Wally World today, they don't have any either. It's somewhere off the coast on a boat, I'm quite sure. So it's part of the supply chain shortage, supply chain shortage that everybody's dealing with across all industries. But we'll find something. But for now, I'm just using regular Rust-Oleum. I paint both parts real well. Paint the back of the part I'm welding in. I paint everything. Then I go back after I get things kind of put in place, and just where I'm going to be welding, I clean up the weld or the paint out of that spot as best as I can. Still in the process of just tack welding this in, but I was going to mention that I had this big hole here where I had drilled a spot weld hole, and there was a kind of a bad area in there. I was going to show you what to do with that. So the first thing you need to do is have a glove, and then get yourself a piece of brass or aluminum, and you just kind of hold it behind the hole there, and that allows you to have something to weld against to build a puddle up and fill that and melt those two pieces together, as well as filling that gap. So I'll try to show you how I do that. It's kind of a bad spot to get at here, but I'll bring the camera over this way more and let you see in there. We got it held in there now. We'll just start fill welding. Voila! Alright, it ain't pretty, but it's in there. The plug welds are mostly filled. It's got some tack welds along the edge. I'll need to go through and solid weld it around the edges and fill in the tack weld. But unfortunately, this took longer than I expected in amount of time for today. But it's in there and it's structurally doing what it's supposed to do. This back corner of the car is already significantly stiffer. and really happy with the way that's working for us. So I got to redimension back corner, make sure everything is in good shape, blah, 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 but I'm quite sure everything is where it belongs. I can already tell you it is, just by looking at the quarter panel. So I think we're in good shape there. So, yeah. Oh, I was going to show you some more issues of where I did that using brass and aluminum to plug weld. I'll take you over to a different car and show you what it looks like on the backside. If you look at this, we welded in. There was probably 653.2 holes in this firewall on this 47 Ford. Some of them we cut in coins. A lot of them, if they were a dime or smaller, we just went ahead and filled them in, just like what I showed you. There is a bazillion of those things in this firewall, all the way up over there, back over there. They turn out really nice, and it's just a good way to go. And if you haven't seen the firewall on the front side, let me show it off. The goal on this car was 100% perfectly clean firewall with zero of anything mounted to it. There's no holes in this firewall at all. They've all been fill welded, fill welded, finished ground. There's only one I'll show you. That's the only hole in the firewall we didn't fill, because that's where the hood release cable goes. Believe it or not, 1947 Ford had a hood release inside the car, and that's where the cable runs out for that. But other than that, all the wiring comes down through a hole down here, really low. The master cylinder is down under the floor where it was from the factory, and everything else is gone. The bulkhead is moved. So that's the kind of stuff you can do when you get good with, you know, plug welding and so forth, and then do some good metal finish. There's just a very small coat of tiger hair over those little holes just to fill in any imperfections. And I don't even think I put Bondo on this firewall, if I remember right. There may be a little teeny bit, but it was mostly just a fill prime, and then a lot of hours of blocking and sanding. Pardon the dirt, she's a dirty pig. This was one of those little projects I had just been kind of saving up for a day like today when I didn't have a lot of time, and it did take longer than I expected, but that's okay. I'll get it. I've got more welding to do on the frame anyway, so I'll knock that out at the same time as I get that done. But it's another little piece forward of something that can help stiffen this car up and just make things better. A rule of thumb for me, just so you know, I never leave the shop immediately after I've been welding. Now, what do I mean by that? So I'm always terrified of my building burning down, and here's why. Not just because of this building, although this building is a tinderbox, and all the different shops I've had, and I've had quite a few. Many years ago, I was welding, probably, I'm guessing it was maybe on the Pro Street GTS, and went in the house and went about dinner or whatever it was that evening, and just forgot about it, didn't think anything of it. Decided to go back out to the shop just to admire what I had been doing. Opened the door to the smell of smoke, and some hot coals had gotten into some stuff under the car. I don't think it was shop rags, but it was something, and started smoldering. Thank God that I went back out there that night and happened to check, or I could have lost that barn and you wouldn't be seeing that car either at this point, probably. So as a rule of thumb, I really try to check the shop for several hours after I'm done welding, because you never know what a hot spark could get under that you're not aware of. I actually had one time where grinding sparks had put something smoldering. I was in the shop, but it's something that you need to really be aware of, because things can go south really quickly if you're not paying attention. So my rule of thumb is a minimum of 2 hours of checking on the shop every 15-20 minutes, half hour, before I leave the property to go somewhere else. I prefer more than that, but I'm a little against the wall tonight, and I wanted to get this episode done, get things finished up here for you guys, so at least things were tacked in place. So you can kind of see this project through to some form of completion. But really, as you know here on this channel, we share the real world. We're not out to accomplish and take something and get it completely done and say, ooh, there you go, and look at what we did in 20 minutes. That's not what this is about. This is about the real world, bite by bite, what you're going to be able to accomplish you got a Saturday afternoon and you got a couple hours between things, and you're going to be able to do some stuff, and then that's what's going to be, because this is not top priority for anybody's life. For most of us, we have a lot of other things going on in the world. Tonight we have a party to go to and other things that we need to be about. So I need to go and wash off all of the man gravy from being out here in the shop all day, sweating and working and all of that stuff. And I will be checking on the shop for the next few hours to make sure that we don't have any burning embers and stuff like that. It was interesting because I do the same thing with the heat as well. Just as a side note, I put the furnace going out here earlier. I come out and check it for a while as the shop is heating up. While I was eating lunch, I walked in the shop. It smelled horrible in here. I could not figure out, something was radically wrong. I didn't know if something got in the electric heater. Got looking around, and the exhaust pipe off of my propane furnace, because of the high winds, had actually blown out and disconnected, and it was blowing raw exhaust out of the furnace here in the shop. Fortunately, there's a big steel plate on the wall. It was only blowing against that, so it wasn't really a fire danger. But you never know. And so when you're working in a shop, I would say just try to be aware of your environment, make things as safe as possible, but pay attention. Pay attention even after. Go check things later. Make sure you don't have something smoldering or something wrong. Because, you know, there's a lot of vehicles in this building. There is a ton of parts in this building, and it probably would be very difficult financially to recover from all of that if everything was to go up in smoke. I just want to reiterate again, thank you to all those who support the channel. Your names are noted here at the end, if I remember to put the slide in. I appreciate every subscriber here on the channel. I appreciate all the contribution of comment and thought and question. When you ask questions, if I need to do an episode specifically on your question, I'm more than willing to do that. Remember that we put out episodes every Friday, every Sunday, and every Tuesday at 7 o'clock in the morning. If you haven't subscribed, please do that. Hit the bell so you receive those notifications. We're on the Face thing. We're on your Instagramma /MyCarsShop. One more thing. Anybody that's been around knows this is the most important part of everything. Because if you can't do this in your life, you probably can't do anything.
Wow.